Hi guys, and welcome to another Wargame Red Dragon tutorial with me, Bubblebox, and today we're going to be looking at the unit stats, or if you'd prefer, the unit information panel. Now, to have a look at the unit information panel, you can either get it up in game by clicking on a unit of your own, or one of the enemies, or one of your allies, and pressing I, and the unit information button will come up, or you can just use any hotkey that you want by changing it in the options. Alternatively, if you just want to browse through the units and look at the statistics, you can go to your decks, or you can go to deck, armory, and have a look in the armory where all of the units are sitting there waiting for you to have a look at. Now I'm just going to have a concentrate on the French units because it is a Eugen product, it is a French company, so it's only right that we use their units, and we're going to have at the Brennus tank. So the first thing we're going to have a look at is over on the right hand side here. The first thing is at the top of the panel. You can see that it just shows the nationality, the name, the points cost, and the unit type. So in this case we've got a French unit, costs 75 points, is an AMX 30B2 Brennus, and you can see it's a main battle tank. So below that we've got below the title bar is between 1 and 3 weapon types depending on the unit, and each weapon has an icon where it has its name, in this case the main gun, its caliber, in this case it's 105 millimeters, and some other tags, which are these things here. Now it's important to try to understand these tags in order to get the best use out of your weapons. For example, this Brennus has KE and AOE. KE, and if you just scroll over them with your mouse, it will tell you what each of these things mean. KE means kinetic energy, so this weapon fires anti-armor kinetic rounds, which means that the closer it gets to its target, the higher its AP value will rise, and I'll just tell you what AP value is shortly. It also has an AOE, an area of effect, so this weapon also fires HE rounds and will have an effect, sort of like a splash-like effect in the area around where that shell lands, and it's the same for all the other units, all the other weapons as well. Now each unit does have a limited supply of ammunition, and the amount is indicated down here in the bold white. So in the case of our main gun, again, it's got 30 rounds, and once those rounds are used up, then you have to resupply it from your logistics trucks or your logistics choppers. Now each weapon has a number of characteristics. First of all, which are all these basically listed here. First of all, you've got the range of things that it can fire at. So this is subdivided into 3 categories: ground and sea, which combine together, anti-helicopter range, and anti-aeroplane range. Now clearly the range type determines the weapon's role. So in this case our main gun can fire at ground units, and that's the range at which it can fire up to, and not at helicopters or airplanes. However, our machine gun here and our autocannon can fire at, as well as at ground units, it can also fire at helicopters as well, but not at airplanes. So that's an important stat to try to understand. Now the other thing which is good for beginners, I suppose, is to look at the colours. So a red stat means it's not very good at doing that particular job. An orange stat means that it's sort of not brilliant but sort of okay. A green stat means it's pretty good at doing that job, and a blue stat means it is very good at doing that particular job. So you can use that as sort of a guideline, so that's quite useful in that respect. Now of course at these ranges you do have to have a proper line of sight, which we spoke about in the last video, in order to take a shot at your target. You can see beneath that you've got a stat for accuracy, and for the main gun here we've got 60%. So accuracy, so hitting your target is never guaranteed in Wargame Red Dragon, and each weapon basically has a chance to hit, and this chance is indicated by the unit's accuracy stat. So in this case it's 60%. So this, every time this weapon fires, it's going to have a 6 out of 10 chance of hitting the target, as long as it's sort of fully healthed up and it's not stressed and it's not moving. Now also the target's range and size, the shooter's experience, or the level of the stress are all factors that impact on the chance of hitting the target. Also, firing whilst on the move can incur an accuracy penalty, and that's where your stabilizer comes in. So the stabilizer stat shows the weapon's accuracy when the unit's moving, and so this tank isn't particularly effective on the move. It's much more effective when it's static. Firepower underneath, you can see that firepower, so a weapon can have either AP or HE damage, or can do either AP or HE damage, or both in the case of our main gun here. AP, armor piercing damage, pertains to fire aimed at armored units only. It won't do any damage to soft units like infantry. HE, or high explosive damage, is an area type damage and is particularly effective against non-armoured units such as infantry, but it can also have some effect on sort of lightly armoured trucks as well. Now also, weapons that have HE, it's worth mentioning here, can cause target to an area even if it can't see the enemy, and to do that you just activate those weapons, you just use the target position button with your mouse in game, or you just press, I think it's T for target, and you can shoot onto a position where you think there's enemy but you can't actually see them. You can do that with HE weapon as well. Beneath that, we're actually going to go down to here is the rate of fire. Now the rate of fire depends on the time it takes to aim, the amount of shots per salvo, and the reload delay between salvos. And by salvo I mean how many shots it gets off in one go. So in the main battle tank, this one is going to have 1 shots, but there's some things like rocket artillery will fire between 10 and maybe 15-20 rockets in one salvo. So I'll just repeat that because it is quite important. So the rate of fire will depend on the time taken to aim, the amount fired per salvo, and the reload time between salvos. The firing time is also affected by the level of stress and the experience of the shooter. Now this sort of pertains to that a little bit. Suppression. The suppression stat is really the ability of your unit to do sort of morale type damage on your enemy to lower their combat effectiveness and eventually hopefully to make them rout and run away. Armor down here, this is quite important as well. Armor reduces damage as you might expect. So armor is localized and has precise values at the front, where normally in tanks it's the strongest. In fact, most vehicles it's normally strongest at the front. On the sides it's got some armor as well, on the back and on the top. And this is important when you think about attacking a unit, and also when you're thinking about defending your units, i.e. keeping everything facing towards the enemy, and also when you're attacking, try to flank them a bit somehow, especially with anti-tank guns, to try and get side shots, rear shots, or use sort of artillery on units with very weak top armor. You can suppress them and even kill them in that way. Especially some of the American, Russian and West German artillery that now shoot armor-piercing weapons from their guns. So now if we look a little bit further down, we can see a few stats at the bottom of the unit panel. Now first of all is the strength. The unit's health or life points is indicated by the unit's strength basically. When a unit level's strength falls below 0, then the unit is destroyed. Units can be repaired, of course, or healed with the help of supply units. Another important stat here is the size. So the bigger the units, pretty much the easier they are to hit, and the smaller the units, the more difficult they are to hit, as you might expect. Optics, very, very important. Enemy units are invisible by default. In order to see the enemy units, one of your units must first locate them. Now each unit has an optics stat which indicates the unit's detection powers pretty much. This is the capacity to discover all of the units in a field of vision. Beneath or opposite that we've got stealth, which is sort of related to optics, and it's sort of contrary to the optics in that the stealth indicates the unit's ability to elude detection by the enemy, is all that means really. Now units that are located but not identified will appear black and their name is actually hidden. Now once seen, a located unit can be identified and full information on that unit obtained. The better experienced your units are, especially the reconnaissance units, the faster and better it can identify an enemy. And it's the reconnaissance units that are really important. And if we have a quick find of a reconnaissance unit somewhere down here, there's one there. So you can see the reconnaissance units generally have much better optics. Generally they're sort of good or very good or exceptional. And they also bear this reconnaissance symbol up the top here with to the right of their name. These will always have sort of optics bonuses, and if these units have got sort of higher experience, their optics will be improved even more. Let's go back to our Brennus. Now moving. When units move, they consume gas, and each unit has a fuel capacity here, and in case of the Brennus it's 1000 litres. So this stat basically just says how much fuel can be carried, and underneath that is the autonomy, and the autonomy stat indicates the maximum distance before running out of fuel. And of course, as with everything else, units can be resupplied by logistics units such as supply trucks from the logistics, from their logistics. Now, other things that are important to understand about stats is how terrain affects movement. Now, wheeled or tracked vehicles can drive along the roads, and they are restricted to a certain speed on the road. So in this case it's 110 kilometers per hour, which is pretty damn quick on the road, and they're also restricted to a slightly different speed off-road, and in this case it's 70 kilometers an hour, which still isn't too bad. This is a tracked vehicle after all. Now, when vehicles move along challenging terrain, such as in forests, they can on occasion take random technical risks, such as breaking down, or due to a burst tyre, or getting detracked, for example, and it takes them a certain amount of time to repair themselves and get going again. Infantry, of course, have an unlimited range. Let's find ourselves an infantry unit quickly. So infantry units have an unlimited range. They don't have any fuel or autonomy stat. They just have a speed at which they can move. Some vehicles are amphibious, and let's see if we can find one. Find an amphibious vehicle. These are amphibious. These Mephistos. So some vehicles are amphibious, and that means basically they can cross rivers or even venture out into the sea if you want them to. And in this case, they will have an amphibious stat over here that indicates the speed of that unit in the water. And if we have a look back at our Brennus, we'll find that has got that greyed out. No, it's not a Brennus. Where's my Brennus gone? There it is. That has that greyed out because this cannot be taken onto the water. Now, a couple of other things I want to do for aircraft and planes. They've got some slightly different stats than the ground units. Insofar as planes are concerned, they've got ECM, which stands for electronic countermeasure, and basically this stands a 30% chance of evading a missile or which is shot at it. So that's what that stat means. They've also got this turn radius here. In this case it's 400, and as it says there, the lower value represents a sharper turn, so they can turn a lot quicker. And generally planes with a shorter turn radius will be better at dogfighting than planes with a larger turn radius, and can also get out of the way of enemies quicker. They've also got this TTT, time over target, and this is basically the time from when you call a plane in to when it self-evacs, or you can of course evac it before this time is up. So it's the time this unit has over the battlefield. One other stat which I didn't actually look at the Brennus is this prototype. So units can be prototypes, and prototypes means you can only bring them in certain specific types of deck basically, and these prototypes tend to be slightly better weapons and specific to certain armies. National armies have prototypes, and the coalition armies have prototypes, whereas if you have a blue 4 or a red 4 deck, you won't get these prototypes. But again, I'll go over that when I get onto the deck system. The last type of stat here is the type, And you can see again this pertains to the deck system, which I will go over when I talk about decks. You can have different deck types and it will tell you which deck types you can bring this unit into. And finally, I just want to have a quick look at the ships because they've got some slightly different stats. The first is they've got these ship-to-ship missiles, and these work in the same way as so far as the range is concerned as the ground units. They've got a very long range. However, they can only shoot at other deep sea ships and coastal ships, and they cannot shoot at riverines, and they cannot shoot this weapon at ground units either. They're just pure ship-to-ship missiles. Also, they also have the ECM, the same as the planes, and they work in the same way as the planes in that they have a chance of deflecting missiles, incoming missiles that are fired at them. The other thing they have is a CIWS, which stands for Close In Weapon System, and this can be either sort of medium or good or very good or exceptional. And this again is a weapon system for deflecting incoming ordnance. Finally, the sailing pertains to where the ships can go, and they can be either deep sea or coastal or riverine. And so deep sea ships can basically go in all of these dark areas and not in the lighter areas. Coastal ships can go anywhere in the dark areas and in the light areas all the way up to the bridge, and riverines ships or boats can pretty much go anywhere they want, even all the way along the rivers in the maps, all the way over to here if they want to. So, thanks for watching this tutorial, guys. I hope you got something out of it. The next couple of tutorials are going to be on the deck system. Please do comment, like and subscribe. I've noticed my subscribers have gone up a bit since I started doing these tutorials, so it really gives me the motivation to do some more and do them quite quickly. So please do subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.